Good morning. Welcome back to our fourth Anchored in the Word morning reflection. Hope your week's going well and looking forward to continue to break down the passage in front of us, and really looking forward to tomorrow being able to work through the final thoughts and kind of the summary of this thing. But the piece that we're going to look at this morning is a really important piece, and that is the need to reflect on God's providence and think about how He manages this world that we live in. And so the text in front of us is Luke chapter 12, and we're going to read it again, and I'm going to begin in verse 22. It says, "And he said unto his disciples, Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, neither for the body what ye shall put on. The life is more than meat, and the body is more than raiment. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap, neither have storehouses nor barns, and God feedeth them. How much more are ye better than the fowls? And which of you, which taking thought, can add to his stature 1 cubit? And if ye then be not able to do that thing which is least, why take ye thought for the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow, they toil not, they spin not. Yet I say unto you, that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed as one of these. If then God so clothe the grass, which today is in the field, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O ye of little faith?" Now, the text in front of us is fascinating because what it does is it shows us how we are to process these anxious doubts. And we talked about what we mean by anxious doubts, what we don't mean, what we do mean, what Christ is communicating here. And so now we're getting to the main point of his focus. And his focus is going to go into two directions. The first part of the focus is what we'll look at today. And that is we have to turn our attention to reflecting on what is true. And specifically what is true about God. What's true about his character. What's true about his ways. What's true about how he manages the world. What's true about how he values his people. And then, Lord willing, tomorrow we're going to focus in on the second piece of focus, and that is how we should drive that energy rather than focusing on the things that we cannot control, the things that are outside of our jurisdiction, the things that are of secondary importance. We need to channel our energy into those eternal pursuits that are going to have lasting impact, that we will experience the benefits of those choices, and others will experience the benefits of those choices eternally. That's what we're saying. So, notice how he talks about how we should channel our thoughts. He says, you must learn to reflect on how God governs his creation. I remember a Martin Lloyd-Jones sermon when he was dealing with this topic of spiritual depression, and there are a lot of sermons that he preached on that topic. In fact, there's a book that we have in our bookstore that is all those sermons put together, that sermon series put together into book form. One of the things that Martin Lloyd-Jones talks about is the importance of learning to talk to yourself about what's going on internally. And what he means by that is that we have thoughts that begin to drive us in certain directions. And there are times that as we are thinking in one way, we need to remind ourselves again of truths and then speak those truths back to ourselves. It's almost like you're having this internal dialogue about thoughts that are pushing you and thoughts that need to be your focused attention. And that's kind of the sense of what he's talking about here. When we are being driven by anxious doubts, we need to turn our attention back to the providence of God and how he governs his creation. And so he says, consider the ravens. He says, consider the lilies. Consider what you are incapable of doing. That's what Jesus tells us to do. But the question is, how do we tend to respond when we are being driven internally by these anxious thoughts? And it's beginning to drive our emotions. What tends to happen? Well, what we often do is we fixate on things that are not true, or we try to bury that thinking with some other kind of diversion. We could say we try to mask the noise through different means. This is one of the things that people do many times when they get involved in substance abuse issues. Drugs and alcohol become this sort of diversion away from these anxious thoughts and this discouragement and this delusion, disillusionment that they are experiencing, those kinds of things. And so what people do is they try to mask those things. Or sometimes people don't go to things like drugs and alcohol. They get involved in hobbies that end up taking their attention away from that. And that's how they bury those thoughts. But what does Jesus tell us to do? Well, he says, actually, rather than burying those thoughts, you need to channel your thinking toward what is true. He calls us to consider. Another word we could use is reflect on, or we could say meditate, chew on these truths. Let your attention be drawn and pressed in the right direction. And he says, consider the ravens. These are animals that are incapable of thinking rationally. Yet what does God say? He says they don't sow, they don't reap, they don't build barns and storehouses, yet God feeds them. And he says, you're better than the fowls. He says, consider the lilies. They don't toil, they don't spin, they don't work, they don't develop their clothing or anything like that. No, what happens? God, in all of their raiment, he makes them beautiful out there in the fields. And you think about what happens during this time of the year. It's the spring, and so everything looks dead and brown, and there are no leaves in the forest. And all of a sudden, as it starts warming up, and we're starting to go through this now, you start seeing these blossoms opening, and there's flowers everywhere. And some of those flowers that come up are those lilies and those tulips and the different beautiful flowers that are bulbs. They're in the soil. They look like there's nothing there, and all of a sudden they burst through, and they give us these beautiful flowers. He says, why do they do that? Well, it's because God made them to do that. He created, he designed the systems that cause those things to take place how they do. And then he says, don't just think about how God takes care of the ravens and how he takes care of the lilies, but think about how limited you are. By worrying, you can't accomplish anything, really. You can't move and change things just by fixating on them. And so he says, which of you, taking thought, can add to his stature 1 cubit? If you're not able to do that thing which is least, why take ye thought for the rest? So Christ's logic is very simple. Consider the implications when you are being driven by anxious doubts. Consider the implication of how God cares for his creation. Consider the implication of how limited you are. This is an issue fundamentally of doubt as opposed to faith. That's what he's saying. And so he says God takes care of the animals and he takes care of the grass. And guess what? You need to mature in your faith. And that's why he closes out in verse 28 by saying, how much more shall he clothe you, O ye of little faith? You know what that tells me? That tells me that Christians can struggle with doubts and anxiety. I mean, obviously our experience tells us that that's the case. But Jesus is saying it's possible to believe, to trust in the Messiah, to be a believing person, and still have a small faith, an immature faith, a little faith. That means we need to grow, we need to mature in these areas. And so my challenge to you this morning is a simple one. When you are bombarded with anxious doubts, as defined by the things that we find in this text of Scripture, don't bury and mask the noise. Don't fixate on those thoughts that may not be true at all, or they're of lesser importance, or they're outside of your control, your jurisdiction. They're not your duties. Rather, channel your thinking on what is true, how God takes care of his creation, how he clothes the grass of the field, how the lilies are beautiful in the fields, how the ravens' needs are met, and say, you know what? I can't control all kinds of things in this world. I'm going to trust the God who manages his creation. Let's remember the kind providence of God, especially toward his children. Have a blessed morning. Lord willing, tomorrow we'll have some final thoughts. Bye now.